right, everyone. So let us come back to the sutta we were discussing before and talk a little bit more about it and discussing who the Buddha was, how to make the Buddha your teacher, how to kind of understand that it is extraordinary to have someone like the Buddha as your guide in life, and how rare it is in the world and how difficult it is to get a teacher like that. And I said I was going to tell a little story about that. It's one of the sweet, cute little stories that you find in the Vinaya Pitaka. And this is the story of Anathapindika and how he became a disciple of the Buddha. And it's kind of a touching story here. Anathapindika, as you may know, he was a very wealthy businessman in Savatthi, one of the large cities of ancient India, the capital of the Kosalan kingdom. And he had a brother-in-law in Rajagaha, and his brother-in-law was also very wealthy. Yeah, the wealthy people marry, get with other wealthy people. That's always been like that. So his brother-in-law also very wealthy. And so one day he has some business in Rajagaha, and he travels all the way from Savatthi to Rajagaha. So I don't know if you have a map of India in your head, but if you haven't, it is quite a long way. Yeah, it is maybe 500 kilometers, something like that, from Savatthi to Rajagaha. And in those days, there was no planes. You had to kind of get onto the chariot or an ox cart or something like that. It took a long time to travel 500 kilometers. Must have taken many weeks to travel that distance. And so he goes all this way, and then he comes to Rajagaha, and he comes to his brother-in-law's house, and he comes into the house, and he sort of sits down. And then his brother-in-law is busy. He doesn't have any time for him. His brother-in-law is running around, making preparations, telling all his servants to do this, to do that, to work harder, prepare this kind of food, that kind of food, get things organized, and kind of working all day long. Anathapindika is kind of sitting there watching all of this activity going on. And then in the evening, things start to calm down. And then the brother-in-law finally comes to talk to Anathapindika. And then Anathapindika says to his brother, what is going on? Usually when I come on a visit all the way from Savatthi, you come and you say hello and you offer me some tea or coffee. I don't know what they drank in those days, tea, coffee, whatever it might be. There's no tea in India at that time. I have no idea what they drank. Probably not coffee either. Wow, that's kind of dukkha, being born at a time with no coffee. That's kind of terrible. So anyway, so finally, so he says, what are you doing? Are you preparing for the king to visit with the fourfold army? Are you preparing for some magnificent wedding or something? What's happening? And he says, no, I'm not preparing for the king, nor am I preparing for a wedding. So what are you doing that you have no time to say hello to me? And he says, I have invited the Buddha for a meal. Anathapindika says, did you say Buddha? Says, yes, I said Buddha. Did you say Buddha? Yes, I said Buddha. Did you say Buddha? Yes, I said Buddha. Always 3 times, right? Everything in Buddhism is 3 times. And Anathapindika is so excited. He hears the word Buddha, just the sound of that word Buddha. Remember, in the Indian language, the word Buddha means the awakened one. So they understand the meaning of this word. And for him, it is so powerful. He kind of, did you really say Buddha? You must be joking. You didn't say Buddha, did you? Yes. Are you sure you're saying Buddha? Absolutely sure. It's kind of it's interesting. And then he is so excited, and he says to his brother-in-law, well, can I go and see that Buddha now? Straight away. And then brother-in-law says, no, it's the wrong time. It's in the evening now. The Buddha is in solitude. It's the wrong time to see him. Tomorrow morning you can go and see him. And then Anathapindika is so excited, so over the moon, or over the something, over the moon maybe, over whatever it is. He can't even sleep at night. He can't sleep. And then he wakes up in the middle of the night. Oh, is it dawn? Can I go now? Not dawn yet. Goes to sleep again. Wakes up again. Still not the time to go. And the 3rd time he wakes up, it is still dark. But he can't wait any longer. So he gets up, gets dressed, starts walking out in the gate to the city, goes outside of the city. And then suddenly it is pitch black. This is ancient India. It is pitch black. There are wild animals. There are probably criminals around. It's really scary, yeah, to be in the absolute darkness. So he gets really frightened. But then there is a voice in his head that says, one step forward is worth more than, I can't remember now, 100,000 maidens all decked out in jewelry, some kind of weird thing. I'm not sure exactly where that comes from. That's kind of what it is in that sutta. Yeah, so in other words, there's nothing in the world that is worth more than even one step forward in the direction of the Buddha. And so then the courage comes back, and he carries on walking. And this happens a few times. The darkness comes down, yeah? And I think the darkness here is just a symbol of the mind losing its piti, the joy, and then the joy comes back, and the mind lights up again, and then it kind of moves forward, a bit like meditation practice. And then eventually it goes all the way to the Buddha, all the way to the monastery. The monastery is not really a monastery, probably before they had monasteries. It's called the Sitavana, which means the cool grove. It's kind of suitable for the Buddha to stay in the cool grove, right? The Buddha is cool. The Buddha is like this is one of the epithets of the Arahant. They are cool within. So he's staying in cool grove. Then as he walks into this place, the Buddha is walking back and forth doing chankama, like walking meditation. And he sees Anathapindika come. And then he says, come, Sudatta. Sudatta is Anathapindika's name, right? And you can imagine Anathapindika, wow, he knows my name already. Anathapindika even more excited, This is the Buddha. The Buddha has some special powers. And so then he comes in, and the Buddha sits down, and then Anathapindika kind of bows down to the Buddha. And he doesn't really know what to say. So he says, I hope you have slept well. It's early in the morning. And the Buddha says a beautiful verse about, well, the one who has awakened, who doesn't have any defilements anymore, or something to that effect, always sleeps well. And Anathapindika is so happy, so excited. He has seen the greatest thing that is possible to see in the world. And then he bows down to the Buddha again, and he becomes a stream enterer, according to the story. During the talk the Buddha gives him afterwards, he gives him the usual talk, starting with dana, then with sila, then with renunciation, and finally the special teaching of the Buddha, which is the Four Noble Truths. And then the Anathapindika achieves the eye of the stream enterer. Whatever is the nature to arise has the nature to pass away. Yang kinshi samudayang dhammang sabbang tang nirodha dhammang ti is the Pali, one of those very famous verses in Pali. And then he becomes a stream enterer. You can imagine the faith that he has. I don't know if it necessarily became a stream enterer straight away, but sometime during his life, and this is kind of summarized in a sense. And then he leaves. And then when he leaves, full of faith, he travels back to Savatthi, eventually back to the city where he came from, and then he builds this beautiful monastery in Savatthi called the Jetavana, Anathapindika's monastery, Anathapindikasa Arama, which is the name of this place. That's where the famous story, this is the part of the story everyone knows about, He puts the gold on the ground, covers the whole monastery in gold, and then he that's the boring part. The interesting part is the first part. And then he gets this monastery and it builds up, and then that becomes the main place for the Buddha to stay over the next 40 years or whatever it is that he stays in these places. That is the story of Anathapindika. And that tells you of the right kind of attitude when you hear the word Buddha, when you understand what the Buddha is. It's like, wow, is that really the case? The Buddha? Really? Am I lucky enough to meet the Buddha? And you don't have to meet him in person, you can meet him through the suttas. It's extraordinary. You have encountered the most important thing imaginable for a human being. Something that opens up, unlocks the lock to the meaning of life itself. That is what you find. And if you have found the meaning of life, or the answer to the question of the meaning of life, what else are you going to do? Are you going to go to the non-meaning of life and do something silly? Or are you going to stay with the meaning of life? It's kind of obvious. And this is what it is. So when you hear the word Buddha, because it is the awakened one, you know that you are in the proximity, in the vicinity of the meaning of life itself. And that is where this urge, the sense of urgency to live well, to do the right thing comes from, because you understand what is really going on. And then you gain the same kind of insight, inspiration, and positive thing that Anathapindika gained. And then you reflect on the Buddha as it is suggested in the sutta. You understand what these qualities are, so you gain some of the same kind of inspiration. And this is what we were talking about before. So let me just finish off this last few words in the sutta before we go over to the questions afterwards. So we're talking about the Buddha being the supreme guide for those who wish to train, teacher of gods and humans. And so the gods also come to the Buddha to learn. Don't tell that to your Christian friends; they may not like to hear that. But this is what they say. That's what they say here. And so that's kind of obviously is very important, because human beings tend to look to the gods for support, whether it is the Christian god or whatever god it is, or even just the ancient gods of India. The gods are kind of there to support us. You pray to the gods and you offer them something and these kind of things. But in Buddhism, we turn everything upside down. The Dhamma is higher. The gods are not that interesting. Yes, there may be gods, but actually not that important. They're kind of lesser. The Buddha is on top of the hierarchy, teachers of everyone. The Buddha is the one who has understood. The gods may have certain powers, but they haven't really understood what is going on. So this is the idea here. Teacher of gods and humans. And he is awakened, and he is blessed. So you try to get some feeling for the Buddha in this way by reflecting on these things in whatever way makes sense for you. What I'm suggesting now is just my ideas of how to think about this. You may think about these things in a different way. And after a while, you don't really have to think very much. After a while, you just bring your mind towards the Buddha, and you realize that, just this idea of having the Buddha as your teacher is just so extraordinary that it can give rise to a sense of joy straight away. It is not easy. It takes a degree of practice to be able to do this. Some people can do this. I know people who are grown up in very Buddhist countries like Sri Lanka or Thailand. They can do this very often quite easily because they already have a relationship with the Buddha. But for many modern people, it is not so simple and straightforward. So you need to practice this idea. Who is actually the Buddha? What is actually going on here? And then, as you do that, then this beautiful sequence that you find in the sutta, it starts to happen by itself. So when you are thinking about the Buddha, your mind is not full of desire, ill will, and confusion. This is my preferred translation instead of greed, hate, and delusion. Desire, ill will, and confusion. You don't have that. Why? Because your mind is directed towards the Dhamma, and the Dhamma is counter to these kind of things. Greed, hate, and delusion happen when you're interested in the world. But now you're turning your mind away from the world towards the Dhamma, and these things cannot really exist when you are fully turning your mind towards the triple gem or the Buddha. You can feel that your mind clears up, because you are directing it towards the right kind of thing. Clears up of these little defilements. And when these defilements are cleared up, then the mind becomes straight, unswerving, he has translated here, but straight to me is an easier word than unswerving. How many people use the word unswerving? Not many people, right? A very rare word. So straight is better. So I should tell Bhante Sujato off for using such vocabulary. He's my friend, so I can tell him off. It's no problem. So the Pali word is ujju. Ujju means straight. It's actually the same word as in English. Rujju is the Sanskrit word. Same word as straight or right. The mind is straight. Crookedness is an aspect of the defilements. And so you don't have a crooked mind anymore. It is straight. And when the mind is straight, based on the Buddha, based on that reflection, the noble disciple whose mind is straight finds inspiration in the meaning and the teaching. Inspiration is Veda. Veda means both feeling and understanding coming together. And in English, when you say understanding, when you say inspiration, inspiration means this. You feel something when you're inspired, right? You feel, wow, I've got to do this. I'm inspired. But you also have an understanding at the same time when you are inspired. You are inspired precisely because you understand. You have. So it's the same idea in English. So inspiration is a very good translation here. So you're inspired by the Dhamma and the meaning, I think it is. Meaning and the teaching. The Dhamma and the Atta are the two Pali words. And because you understand who the Buddha is, that means you also understand the Dhamma. You understand what those qualities are. You understand what it means to be a Buddha. And therefore, what that teaching also is about. These things kind of come together. They're two sides of the same coin. And when you understand the Dhamma, the teaching, you also understand the purpose of those teachings, the aim, the goal, in other words, the meaning, what they are pointing to, what we are trying to achieve. You understand the meaning of happiness and overcoming suffering. You understand the idea of eliminating the bad qualities and defilements and all of these kind of things. You understand the purpose of these teachings. Ultimately, you understand Nibbana itself. And that lifts you up. Why? Because you know that you're on the highway to the highest happiness that you can possibly find. This is what this path is about. It's a highway to the greatest happiness in the world, to the overcoming of all suffering. How can you not be inspired by that? This is what everyone wants, and now you have found it. This is we don't really understand we have found it. That is the problem. But once we get around to that, it obviously is very inspiring. And so you are inspired by the meaning or the purpose and the Dhamma. And because of that, the joy arises. You start to feel joyful. This is now, it is really starting to work. And so you do this contemplation at the beginning of your meditation. And then once it starts to work, then you sit down, you close your eyes, and you kind of join it up, maybe with the breath meditation. So the joy and the breath kind of go together. The Buddhanussati gets it started, and then the process happens through watching the breath or through any kind of object you may want to use, maybe metta, or maybe you want to contemplate the Buddha even more deeply if the joy becomes more powerful. And then this beautiful process takes off. The joy here is the pamujja. From that joy comes the rapture, which is like the physical sensation of bliss in the body very often. Like a coursing kinds of bliss. It's kind of physical and mental at the same time. It can be very strong and very kind of very beautiful feeling. And then as you keep on meditating, it becomes even more beautiful. Then because it calms down and you lose some of this perception of the body, and then you get this bliss, which is much, again, more tranquil, more peaceful, deeper than the previous rapture. So you can see here how one beautiful feeling leads to the next one. Two things happening more than anything else. On the one hand, you're becoming more peaceful, and the other hand, you're experiencing more and more profound bliss. Two things going together, until eventually it becomes so profound that you come to a state of samadhi. This is how you know that this is the real samadhi, because it is very, very blissful and extremely peaceful at the same time. If it is only peaceful, it is not really the best kind of samadhi. And if it is only blissful, then again it is missing a very important component of samadhi. But when those two things come together, that is the indication that you are really on the right track. Samadhi is real. And this is also then the jhanas that happen around this particular point. And when this happens, then it is said that you are called a noble disciple who are in balance in the population that is unbalanced. People are unbalanced because of defilements. You are untroubled among people who are troubled. You have entered the stream of the teaching and you develop the recollection of the Buddha. So this is the idea here. This is why we want to do these kind of recollections. And this is what they lead to eventually when we do it fully. So you become balanced and you become untroubled. when the world around you is troubled, when the world around you does crazy things, you couldn't really care less about the world. Yeah, who cares about the world? The world is just endless politics and crazy things, and you realize there is no real solution in that realm. Yeah, we have been trying for millennia and for lifetimes and for eons to find solution in the realm of politics, and all we find is more dukkha, 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 dukkha. Now the time has come to give it all up and head in a different direction instead. So, that is the beginning of this little sutta on the triple gem, and we're going to carry on tomorrow. I think use at least all of tomorrow just on this sutta. I think the retreat is too short. That's what I'm beginning to realize. Too short. Actually, we should only do one sutta for the whole retreat, I think. Too many suttas. Can we extend it? Yeah? Okay. Cool. So that's good. So we'll see how things go anyway. So this is a nice starting point anyway for the rest of the things that we're going to do. So now it is already 8:10. So are there any questions, Dilla, for tonight, or are there? Is there a box with questions? Yeah. Okay. Would you like to anyone like to bring them forth? Okay.